Thank you for listening to the Crappie Blog Crappie Cast. Today's guest is Brad Chappell of Crappie Connection.
Yeah.
Brad, thanks for coming on. If you would kind of introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Brad Chappell from Ridgeland, Mississippi, full-time guide on Ross Barnett, Lake Washington, Eagle Lake, and also do a lot of stuff just like you do as far as the media side of things with crappie fishing. Been guiding about 12, 13 years now, and doing the Crappie Connection about 4.
Awesome. So Brad, one of the things that I'm asking anglers is, what are your top 5 products? What are the top 5 products you have to have in your boat that you feel like make you a more successful angler day in and day out on the water?
You know, even first I'm going to emphasize safety when it comes to being on the boat day in and day out. And one thing that I always make sure that's in my boat and ready is going to be a good first aid kit. You just never know what's going to happen on the lake, and you don't want to have any kind of regrets when you could have saved a situation in a bad deal. So one's going to be a really first aid kit. You always got to have it and have it ready to go at all times. And just any kind of safety equipment is going to be the first thing that you want to have in your boat, and make sure you're ready to go with it at any given time. But, you know, after that, for me, I use artificial bait 99% of the time. If I've got minnows in the boat, it's usually going to be a very hard bite and very difficult day, I know. So, you know, with me, it's going to be a good selection of baits, anywhere from very small baits all the way to the bigger style. At the end of the day, in my boat, if I'm really looking for fish and trying to fine-tune fish, it's going to look like a Skittle package blew up, because I'm going to go through everything, you know, very thoroughly, and kind of let the fish tell me what's going to work and what's not. So in turn, it's going to be baits everywhere, different profiles, different colors. So just a really good selection of baits. Don't live and die by one style or even one color.
So when you're talking downsizing to little stuff, how little are you going?
You know, all the way to a 1/48th, and as small as 3/4 of an inch. So very tiny. And, you know, I really utilize those more in the summertime and also the wintertime. I think of those 2 seasons, not really the hardest, but also when they can probably be the most finicky is when it's extremely cold and extremely hot. So those 2 seasons of the year is more than likely when I'm going to really downsize. Yeah. So it's just having a really good selection of, you know, all sizes of everything.
Right, because sometimes I want to eat a brownie and sometimes I want to eat a banana.
Well, you might have a Snickers and then all of a sudden you might want a steak. So, you know, a little snack compared to a big meal. And that's kind of like these fish.
Yeah. I had a guy explain it to me one time. He said, you may not always be hungry for a 4-course meal, but you'll always eat a little snack.
That's right, and a little Snickers bite. So that's what I try to feed them some days. When I'm struggling, I'm going to downsize and really get it out to them and have it easy for them.
So that's as small as you go.
Yeah.
What's as big as you go?
You know, this past wintertime, I was on a bite and fished extremely aggressive, and I actually went all the way up to about a 3.5-inch swim bait. Soft plastic. It was really a bass bait, to be honest with you. So really, as big as I go is about 3.5. You know, just like crankbaits, pulling crankbaits. A Bandit 300, a 2.5-inch bait, and then a bill on top of it. So bigger baits can be, you know, it's time and place as well. But you know, all the way to a 3.5-inch swim bait sometimes. So let the fish kind of tell you.
Right.
Being versatile. I think, you know, I don't necessarily say it's a product, but it kind of goes with hand in hand on both sides of it is you just got to be really versatile, be a good crappie fisherman. Not an average crappie fisherman, but if you want to become a good crappie fisherman, you've got to learn to be really versatile. And I think a lot of people get in their boats and they'll just say, all right, I've got black and chartreuse or a solid white jig, and they live and die by it. Right. And it makes all the difference in the world for me as far as just having enough products to go through and keep cycling.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the key. I feel like is being able to be so versatile. You know, like we're out here right now at Kentucky Lake. You know, you're down in Mississippi where it looks like you could walk across the water.
Yeah, a lot of days.
You know? And so it's so different, and you have to be able to adjust, or you're not going to be successful.
Oh, definitely not. And you know, even we talk about a product, and it kind of goes with products as well, but it's also selecting the right poles to whatever technique you're wanting to do. You know, when I began crappie fishing, 40 years ago pretty much, we used cane poles pretty much, with bobbers, and we just sat there and did that. But now with the new age live sonar and different things, and even before live sonar, matching up the technique to a proper pole is essential. You know, like the TCB B&M casting pole, it's a very light action limber rod, casting rod. And then we've got a 7.5 foot 75th series B&M pole, and you think, well, what's the difference between those poles? And for me, even though there's two differences between that pole, when I would use one versus the other, is I want a really sensitive light action pole on a tough bite, because I want to be able to feel a fish look at it hard. So you've got to kind of match up even the pole with what technique you're doing. You wouldn't want to go, using a B&M graphite jig pole if you're wanting to chase roaming fish, because the action of it's just way too soft. So 18-foot black diamonds, I've been using that pole for the last 2 months every single day, chasing down open water fish, because I can put a bigger weight on it, actually, have a good presentation to that fish, and catch a lot of fish in turn by matching up the proper poles that you're utilizing to the technique that you've got in place. So, it's not just about selling products, but, all these products made by different manufacturers are really developed for a particular day, for a particular bite, and a particular time of year even almost sometimes. So I kind of look at, I have so many poles because I want to match it up to whatever situation I got to come to. So really digging into a lineup and say, all right, I'm a mainly cast. If I was coming up at this lake this week fishing, I know it's fairly clear body of water, so I'm gonna cast a lot. So I'm gonna use 7.5 foot, maybe, if they're aggressive. But if a cold front or anything that I think these fish are finicky, I'm gonna go to a lighter action. So just trying to really match up your gear correctly. Yeah. I think a lot of people say, well, I need to save money, and I get that, I really do. But I always tell people when they get in the boat and they want to learn how to crappie fish is, invest in good equipment. Do it one time, even if you gotta, wait a little while. Invest in quality equipment the first time, and it will definitely suit you better in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, we covered 1 and 2. What do you think, number 3?
Good electronics. I started out years ago with Lowrance, and I'm really familiar with Lowrance as well, but here all of a sudden Garmin comes aboard with live sonar or live scope, and I think I did like everybody else. I went out and bought a 9-inch screen. And then a month later, I get a guy's boat and he's using a 12-inch, and I'm like, man, I wish I'd have bought that 12-inch. So do a little research, and even if you've got I wouldn't say sacrifice, but save up another month or two, go ahead and get the very largest screen that you can put on your boat at one time instead of doing it 2 or 3 times over. And it's going to save you money in the long run.
Buy once, cry once.
That's it. I mean, just go ahead and bite the bullet, buy you the biggest screen that you can afford, even if you got to save up for a month or two to put on your boat.
Absolutely.
So electronics is definitely up there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I hear time and time again from asking anglers is get the biggest you can get.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
You will regret it in the long run.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things you will, because you have from experience.
Oh yeah,
I have from experience. It's just
I was like, man, this 9-inch is $1,000 cheaper, and I really don't know if I was going to like it or not. And then I'm like, man, as soon as I got it, I'm like, man, why not I just go ahead and spend the extra money and get that larger screen? So, especially as you get older, and you experience it more and more daily, and you need the bigger screen to see what you really need to see. For me, I use a 12-inch screen. I know a lot of guys at fish tournaments, they use 18s and 16s and such, but a 12-inch screen is a really great size for somebody. Even if you're going to, first unit you're going to put on your boat, go ahead and put a 12-inch unit on your boat.
Because even, they had, I think whenever I had decided to go from the 9-inch to the 12-inch, Bass Pro, like the 10-inch was $1,000 and the 12-inch was $1,200. Right. Or $1,290, $1,300. I'm like, it's worth it. That $300.
Yeah, and you always, everybody's, especially nowadays, wanting to, be budget friendly, and I get it. Like I said, I totally. But save up, get the largest screen that you can possibly afford, even if it means waiting a month or two.
Yeah.
Save up and get the largest screen. So I would say getting really good electronics for your boat, and then actually getting the largest size that you can possibly afford. And number 4, I wouldn't even say it's a product. And people starting crappie fishing, and let me tell you, even from my side of things, it's so confusing whenever you're looking at all these different techniques that everybody does and catch fish with day in and day out. Invest in a good guide, no matter what part of the country you're at now, whether you're from Mississippi or Indiana or even Kentucky Lake has some really good guides.
Right.
Where we're at right now. But invest in a really good guide. And one of the questions that I have people ask me, and I really appreciate too, is tell them that you're just wanting to learn. Most guides, at least for me, for example, when somebody says, I just want to go out and I really want to learn some different techniques and learn how to find fish, be honest with a guide, tell them what you're wanting to accomplish with a trip. And like I said, I don't know if it's necessarily a product, but it's a top 4 things to me to actually think about whenever you're getting into crappie fishing to invest in.
Well, and for you as a guide, it probably takes a little bit of that pressure off, because most people come, they want to catch their limited fish. They got to catch limited fish. Yep. And so that takes that pressure off of you as a guide and say, well, I know how to do this. Right. I can show you, I can teach you how to do this.
Ask questions. People get in the boat, and I've had, different clients through the years, they'll break out a notebook and say, all right, I had these questions I wanted to ask you, and we'll go through the complete thing. But, go ahead and invest in getting a guide. And sometimes you might have to get 1 or 2. If you don't go out with one guide and you don't understand how he describes things to you, get another guide. But spend, the money that you would waste on the water by not catching fish, right, by learning how to do it a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah. I have a good friend back home that he is just tearing it up with live scope. Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, how? He said, I tell you, he said, it knocked the learning curve for me by so much. He actually had hired TJ Shands. Yep. And he's like, I went down, he said 3 or 4 times with TJ. He said, oh, yeah. And now I know, like, this is how you do it. This is what a big fish looks like. Because when I first started, I was chasing every little 6-inch fish in the lake, trying to catch them, until it clicked with me of, hey, that's fish is the same size as my bait that I've got in the water. Right. It's like, it's something that it takes, and once it clicks, once it clicks, you're like, all right, I got it.
Time on the water, then it kind of come and play. But, learn from a guide and go in there and be an open book and say, hey, look, let's learn some different things. And through the years, those have always been my favorite. And even when I fished tournaments a lot back in the day, I had different clients get in the boat, and then they would go on their own, and all of a sudden I'm competing against them. Right. And they were really good fishermen. I mean, I would get beat by people that I taught, and you're like, man, that kind of stings. But another thing, it kind of, for me, it was like a pat on the back, because you're like, all right, I really helped this person, and not only did I take them to where they could catch fish, but also I took them to the level that they could compete. Right. And once you kind of spend the money, I think it's well worth somebody investing as far as I don't necessarily a product, but it's also something that can be really valuable for any kind of angler wanting to get into crappie fishing.
To make them more successful.
Make them more successful, and that's what we all want to do.
Yeah, absolutely, because, guys, if you go on the weekend, well, that weekend time's your time too. That's it. If you take off work throughout the week to go, then you want to try to catch
vacation time.
That's right. You got to, time is time and time is money, and you've got to try to get as much as what you can accomplish in the time that you have to fish.
That's right. And I think about, I guess, 4 or 5, but is line. And you can go through different places to buy fishing line, and you can buy a big spool for $2 or $3, but also I think a lot of people overlook line size. If I'm going to use small jigs, I don't want a 10-pound test. And that sounds simple to a lot of us that fish a lot, but actually buying line that match up to whatever tackle you're planning on using. And you're like, well, I don't want to lose that bait. And I hear that all the time, that I've got 12 pound on because I don't like losing baits. Well, in turn, you're not catching as many fish either. And it's kind of like time is money for everybody. Regardless if it's your day off and you're spending your resources to go fishing, you might as well really spend the money on the right equipment. And it's something as simple as using the right line size. Mm-hmm. If you're using small jigs, use small line. Bigger jigs, you can get away, a little bit as far as the size of the line. You can go up. And depending on what technique, you got to kind of match it up with that. Pulling crankbaits, for example, I fish at Ross Barnett, and it's got a lot of structure in it, just like Kentucky Lake. And fish really gravitate on structure. Well, we started out pulling crankbaits when we'd use monofilament. Well, as soon as you get caught up in anything, you would lose a crankbait. Well, there goes $5-6. Now $7 or $8 a crankbait. Well, I try to figure out, what could I do to combat losing $7-8 crankbaits at one given time, one stump? Sometimes it'd be all 8 poles get hung up. But I learned how to use braided line for the simple fact that I wouldn't lose as many baits and still have the same depth and different things. But do some research on whatever technique that you're really wanting to fish and match up the line size, or even between monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid. They all got their place. It's just not as simple as going into a local bait shop and just grabbing one size and think that's going to take you to every technique out there and be successful, because you want to go out there and you want to catch fish. That's what everybody fishes for, is to have something tug on that line. So match up a good quality line. I've been using K9 for a couple of years now, great product line, and whether I'm chasing down open water fish, or if I'm long lining jigs, or I'm pulling crankbaits, they've got a lineup that actually matches the technique that I'm wanting to do. Yeah. So match up a good line to whatever technique you want to do, and just take time and research the right products.
Yeah, that's it. I mean and that's what this whole podcast is about. Mm-hmm. Is there may not be people that fish the murky waters in Mississippi, but those same products that you use can be used at other lakes too, like Dale Hollow or Kentucky Lake or wherever you want to go. That's a lot clearer, and that's the thing, is do your research and know, hey, yes, if I'm going here, I don't need to use 25-pound braided line. I need to use, say, 6-pound monofilament or 6-pound fluorocarbon or whatever the case may be. That's right. And like you said earlier, I can't be using an 18-foot rod if I'm wanting to cast to them, or if they're spooky. We've seen spooky fish out here today that you couldn't get up on real close, and so I was actually casting to them. Yep. And so you've got to adjust your technique. And just like you talked about, and having all those right things come together when it all comes together. Everything in my boat, and you look at my boat, and I've got 15-foot Talons on my boat, and there's not a lot of guys using Talons, but how I really learned how to utilize them for me is because of spooky fish. Our fish in the summertime, they get on brush piles, and you would see it with live sonar, you couldn't get any closer than 25 feet from them, or either they would bury up in the structure or they would just leave it. So in turn, I put 15-foot Talons on my boat so I could anchor down and cast to them. And then now with chasing roaming fish, not only I've got 15-foot Talons on the back, I've got power brake trolling motors on the back of the boat so I can actually stop the boat when I need to. Longer poles chasing down open water fish because they're spooky. That's why you want a longer pole. A lighter sensitive pole when you're wanting to cast to them. Everything has a particular purpose to make it a little bit better. And I think it's real easy to go into anywhere and just say, all right, man, I see 40 different poles. They all must do the same. And I would just about be willing to bet that every pole out there, no matter what brand there is, there's something that it's going to really shine at, from a technique to even a bite. Mm-hmm. And you think of a casting pole, I just like a medium light pole. Well, that's fine until you get a really sensitive bite.
and then all of a sudden you can't feel that bite as well as if you had a medium light pole.
Right.
So everything has a really particular purpose. So research what technique fits whatever brand pole you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a bunch out there.
Yeah, there is.
There's a lot of great products out there. And we're very fortunate because you think about 30 years ago, everybody had just
Zebco 202s.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same poles, either that or a cane pole, bobbers and hooks, which was simpler. Don't get me wrong.
That's right.
But we catch a whole lot more fish than we used to, as far as the fishing public goes. And it was all developed for particular days, particular bites, and particular situations. So just really researching what kind of lake you're fishing at. If you're fishing a heavy structure, well, you might want to look at, stiffer poles to bring them out of the brush. Or if you're wade fishing, I mean, there's poles designed just for that. So look at techniques that you're wanting to do, but also look at what gear fits that technique and that situation the best.
Absolutely.
It will save you money in the long run.
Yeah, that's right.
And you catch more fish. That's what it's about.
That's what it's all about.
That's all it's about. And like I said from the beginning, choosing different styles of baits, different profiles of baits. I'm a bait junkie. I've always been that way since I started crappie fishing. I'm not the guy that's going to go out there and say, all right, I had a black and chartreuse. They just wouldn't bite it. They ain't biting today. I'm that guy that has 40 different colors in the front of the boat, and they're thrown here, they're thrown there, because I'm cycling through them and seeing. Now we've got live sonar that you can see if a fish swims up to it and swims away. And when that happens, I know I ain't got something right.
That's right.
Just into it. Keep trying. I throw the sink at them.
So quick. Awesome. Well, Brad, thank you for coming on today. I do appreciate it. Guys, check out Brad Chappell and the Crappie Connection for more info crappie related. Brad, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, bud. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on.